Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Partaya Pradibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitaamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvāmanasandadhāmi Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharatataila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetre Kapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you for joining us again tonight. So far, Lord Krishna has talked about 3 types of sannyasa, renunciation. And he pointed out that sattvic sannyasa, which is the best, is simply karma yoga. And such a sannyasi, such a person who renounces like that, does not renounce their household duties, especially the compulsory ones, which are yajna, dhanam, and tapas. We've talked about this many times, just to review. Yajna means like sacrifice in one way, offerings, but here it means basically giving back to the universe, to nature, to the world, on the macro level. Dhanam typically means charity, but here it really means more giving back on the micro level. So you can plant a tree for the world, and you can also feed somebody nearby at a homeless shelter like we do here every Sunday, first Sunday of the month. And tapas means disciplining one's own mind. So if that's all that they're doing, then how can we call them a sannyasi? Because they renounce the attachment to the action as well as its results. So this synonym for karma yoga, which is sattvic sannyasa, is also known as bhakti yoga or bhakti yogi. Thus, all 3 are one and the same thing: karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and sattvic sannyasa. It is the ideal life for a householder. According to Amma, the householder's whole life is an offering to the world. So Arjuna doesn't have any excuse to avoid his duties. Some duties may be pleasant, while others may be unpleasant, like the war that he's facing. The definition of pleasant and unpleasant depends on our likes and dislikes. Basically, they're vasana driven, so that's also not really a excuse for shirking from your duties. Now we're going to learn about the 5 causes of action in verse 14. adishtanam tata karta karanancha pratak vidham vividascha pratak cheshta Taivan chaivatra panchamam. Now together. Adishtanam tata karta karanancha pratagvidham vividhascha pratak cheshta daivanchaivatra panjamam. I didn't change much on this verse, just I put something in parentheses. The body, the agent, the various senses, the different functions of a manifold kind, and the presiding divinity are the five, and I put factors for the success of an action in parentheses because they don't that isn't specifically mentioned in the verse. So we can see the commentaries, and Shankaracharya says that it is the body upon which depends the manifestation of desire, hatred, pleasure, pain, knowledge, etc. So it is the base, it's like home base, in other words, the body. And the agent is the enjoyer who partakes of the characteristics of his antakarana. Remember, antakarana means the inner instrument, which is the subtle body, and it's the energy level, or what they call as kosha, which means sheath. So we can say it's the energy sheath, it's the mental sheath, and it's the intellectual sheath put together. Those three put together is the antakarana. And Shankaracharya says that this statement, the different functions of a manifold kind, it seems very unintelligible for us to understand. And he simplifies it. He says it's the pranamaya kosha. It means all of the pranas, the life forces that are moving through the body. And if you're familiar, you might know that it is said in yoga that there are 72,000 nadis, which are the channels through which powers or the life force flows. So in each one of those has a presiding deity. So just imagine how many gods there must be. Like Amma says, there's a god for raising your hand and lowering your hand, and if you don't have the blessings of both, then you either won't be able to raise your hand or you won't be able to put it down again. So they're important for sure. Jnaneshwar has some more commentary that will cover the rest of the questions you might have. He says, of the 5 causes of action, the body is first, we got that. It is called the seat because the enjoyer lives in it, together with the objects to be enjoyed. So it's like people, these days it's like you're sitting in your computer chair in front of your computer, and that's how you get all your information, and you watch movies, or you communicate with people. So it's like the seat, really. I mean, just imagine that in 5,000 years ago, they would have said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. You do everything from a seat. And in their case, they're talking about the body itself. And prakriti, he uses that word. Prakriti, we keep encountering that word, but I'm going to explain it again. It means the material world, everything that is material. And that means down to atoms, quarks, everything. And the only thing that is different from there and in the pralaya, when the whole universe is dissolved, is that the matter has ceased to exist, but it's going to come back. So that's this cyclical time tracking that they have in India. So it's not gone forever, it's going to come back in the next creation. But all that matter that is created in physics they would call it after the Big Bang. That is all Prakriti. So the only thing that's not Prakriti is pure consciousness. So he says, Prakriti, this world, guarantees pleasure and pain, exerting herself day and night. Prakriti is considered to be a female word. Exerting herself day and night with the help of 10 hands in the form of 10 organs. In India, organs are those of perception and of action. So we know the 5 organs of perception, like the eyes and ears, but they say like speaking and walking, these are also organs of action. So there's 5 of each, so that's 10 hands. The Purusha has no other place. The Purusha, I have to explain that too. It comes back in chapter 13, verses 22 and 23. You can refer to that later. But it means the pure consciousness that is seated in this world, but not partaking in it. We're going to get to that. So the Purusha has no other place but the body where it can experience these, and therefore the body is called the seat. We're going to get more about that, so don't worry about it. It's a little cryptic, I know. And then he says the doer, or the agent, is the second cause of the actions, and it is called Chittabhasa. Chittabhasa simply means the reflection of chit, the reflection of consciousness. We talked about this many times before in the Gita class, and the concept is that the consciousness is everywhere, so it's not like you need to do anything to put it there, but it's not always perceptible. It needs a subtle body. So animals, human beings, and in many ways plants as well, they have a kind of consciousness, and to some degree they can express themselves, not as easily as animals and human beings can, but there have been studies that plants communicate, and they have feelings and so on. So they have a little bit less powerful way of expressing themselves, but they have a bit of consciousness in plants also. But that is reflected in the subtle body, which is mostly the mind and the intellect. Then with his beautiful poetic renditions, he explains some more things. The rains descend from the sky and form a lake on the earth. Then the reflection of the sky on the lake's surface assumes the form of the lake. So the sun looks like it's taking the form of the lake just because it's reflected there. A king loses awareness of his royal position when he dreams that he's a beggar. Similarly, sentience, consciousness, right? Sentience also forgets its own self, and thus an illusion of a body form is created. Then it identifies itself with that body form. I've heard people who have these, have a baby just a few days old or a few weeks old. The babies have no clue why they're in this body. And they're like looking around, they're trying to figure out what is going on. They can't move their body, properly. And they might even hit themselves. And they're like, what is this? They seem surprised that they hit themselves. So when we first got in the body, we didn't know that it was us. But we started identifying with it. Continuation is, consciousness, due to its own forgetfulness, is known as the Jivatma, the personal soul, who has tacitly or quietly agreed to associate itself with the body in all matters. Really, it is Prakriti that does all actions, but through delusion, the Jivatma says that he does them all. Therefore, the Jivatma is also called the doer. I'm going to take a little slight deviation to the secret book of John from the Nag Hammadi library, which is the Gnostic Gospels. You might have heard of that. And in that secret book of John, it says, the chief ruler forced the humans to drink from the waters of forgetfulness, so they do not know their true place of origin. Does it sound a little similar? The Savior said, in those people, the artificial spirit has grown strong. Artificial spirit, it means instead of being the all-pervasive, it's the one that's trapped inside this body. And they have gone astray. Their souls are burdened, drawn to darkness, and cast into forgetfulness. When they come forth from the body, meaning leaving the body, such a soul is given over to the powers created by the rulers, law of karma, and so on. Then they're bound in chains and cast into prison again. What bigger prison, what worse prison could there be than a body? Around and around it goes until it manages to become free from forgetfulness through knowledge. And so eventually it becomes perfect and is saved. That's a different explanation of the Judeo-Christian tradition. At least when I read it for the first time, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that this even existed. Okay, coming back to Jnaneshwar. He says, the lamp wick inside a house is only one, yet it appears to be more than that, due to the patterns of lattice work in the windows. In that way, the discerning power of the intellect is only one, yet it displays itself in different forms through different senses, such as ears and eyes, etc. Therefore, know the different body organs constitute the third cause. Water currents, running in different directions in the form of big and small rivers, appear different, though they are one and the same, because it's water. In that way, prana means life force, prana's power of functioning is constant, but when it operates in different spheres of the body, it appears to be of different types. And Jnaneshwar is kind of an occult person, and he goes on and talking about the names of different functions in the body. When you hiccup, this is what we call it, and then when you sneeze, it's this, and all these different functions. We don't have enough time to cover that, but just if you're interested, you could read his commentary on this verse. So even though prana is one and the same, its activity derives different names from the part it plays. Know that this power of prana is the fourth cause of action. There is an assembly of gods and goddesses, like the sun, that support the 10 senses. They bless them, like the eyes, etc., through their blessings. This assemblage of gods and goddesses is the fifth cause of the actions. Okay. So though Krishna uses different terms, in more common jargon, the 5 factors of the body, the energy sheath, the mental sheath, the intellect, those 3 put together, remember, that's just the subtle body. And the 5th is divinity, some kind of divinity, grace. People want to do lots of actions in the world, and they want to reap the results as well. For that, a subtle body alone is not enough. You need a physical body. That's why they say people who, when they leave their bodies, sometimes they try to enjoy pleasures that they are hungering for, but they can't because they don't have a body. So that's a typical thing and crosses many religions. What Jnaneshwar described in detail is all about the energy sheath, the pranamaya kosha. The mind is an instrument of emotion, while the intellect is an instrument of judgment. They are just instruments that are inside of us on a subtle level, not in the physical level. And the 4th factor is what we would call the doer. Sometimes it's translated as agent, and we heard the Sanskrit word, which is chittabhasa. It's the central factor. It refers to the jivatma, the one who says, I am the doer. That is, the one who identifies with and coordinates all these instruments. And in the Taittiriya Upanishad, it is said Vijnanam, which is the word they use in this Upanishad for the Jivatma, Vijnanam performs all the yajnas and it executes all actions as well. So that means it's not just when you're doing a sacrifice or you're doing your duties, no matter what you do, it is the Jivatma that's doing it. Then what is the final factor? Krishna says it is God. Some kind of blessing is needed for all this to work, because the entire universe operates in accordance with the predetermined laws and principles that come from God. Those laws delimit what we human beings can and cannot do. Now let's find out what is next in verse 15. Sharira vanmanobhiryat karma prarabhate naraha nyayam va viparitam. Nyayam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetavaha. Now together slowly. Sharira vanmanobhiryat karma prarabhate naraha nyayam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetavaha. I only changed the gender specificity here. These 5 are its causes. Whatever action one performs by his body, speech, and mind, and whether it is right or wrong. It's hard to change these completely. So it's just kind of a follow-up, and it's just to expand on the definition of action. So the commentary, I'm just going to take one thing from Shankaracharya's commentary. When the words right or wrong come, he says that means it's either consistent with dharma and conforming to the scriptures, or it's the reverse. It's opposed to the scriptures and to dharma. So even if it's good or bad, doesn't matter. Those are all actions that are governed in this same way. Jnaneshwar says, the sudden advent of spring is the cause of the new foliage sprouting on the trees, bringing in its wake flowers and fruits. The monsoons bring clouds, and the clouds bring the rain, and the rain bring the abundant harvest. The east gives birth to the dawn, while the dawn brings the sunrise, and the day is fully illuminated by the sun. Similarly, the mind is the cause of all thoughts and ideas and actions, and these ideas kindle the lamp of speech. When this lamp brightens the path for actions, the doer sets about performing actions. So this is what is going on in our minds all day long. And he's explaining it very well. You know, we don't think of the process like this, but for a realized poet, that's what it seems like. And Swami Chidbhavananda, he's still got that automobile, example, which is helping. An automobile assembled of countless parts, may be used for various purposes. Some may use it for robbery and manslaughter. Others may use it to rescue people involved in accidents or in hardship. Yet others may utilize it for delivering emergency medical aid. Pleasure hunters put it to use in their own way. The human body may be utilized in all these ways. Thus, it is called the Dharma Kshetra. So that word Dharma Kshetra, when you hear that, I hope you remember those are the first two words of the Bhagavad Gita. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva Kima Kurvata Sanjaya. This is Dhritarashtra is saying, assembled on the field of Dharma, O Sanjaya, on the field of the Kurus, eager to fight, what did my people and the Pandavas do? So, here, Jnaneshwar is calling the body Dharma Kshetra, and in the Gita, it's supposed to be representing a battlefield. So, I think the symbolism is pretty clear. The body is the Kurukshetra. You know, it's the place where all the battles are fought here. I think even in the science of war, they have said that all wars start in the minds of man. So it's so true. And also, it shows in this same tradition, they use that word for both, a battlefield and the body. So for us, that includes the mind. So that this is where we do win or lose all of our battles. The human temple, this is the commentary continued. The human temple made of the 5 components can be utilized for noble purposes. It may be sublimated into a divine place. It can also be converted into a den of diabolical doings. It can be used to perpetrate all possible adharma. It is equally useful for bad acts as for good ones. All human activities fall into 3 categories: thought, word, and deed. The subtlest action takes place in the mind in the forms of thoughts and feelings. Not a moment passes without mental activity of one kind or another. The visible manifestations of it are words and deeds. So even if we're not doing anything, so to speak, the seeds for the next doing are already being planted, even in our dreams. So that's why Amma used to say, when we wake up in the morning, we should rise up on our right side. She's got this whole thing set up. Imagine that the beloved deity or guru is standing in front of us and bow down at his or her feet. Then we can meditate for at least 5 minutes, sitting on the bed. Pray with a full heart. Dear God, let me remember you constantly today. Let each one of my thoughts, words, and deeds bring me closer to you. May I not hurt anyone in thought, word, or deed. Be with me in every moment. So if Amma's with us and we can feel her in every moment, we're not going to hurt anybody. You know, can you imagine going in the darshan line when it's your time, you slap somebody next to Amma? It's not going to happen, right? That's because in our daily life we forget that she's always there. So in verse 13, Krishna said, that's last week or 2 weeks ago, Krishna said, learn from me these 5 causes for the accomplishment of all actions, as declared by the wise, which is the end and means of all actions. Now in this verse, like I said a little while ago, he elaborates by specifying that all actions includes both good and bad ones, through thought, words, and physical actions. It's not just physical, it's thoughts and words too. Good actions start from good thoughts, and as do bad thoughts. The bad actions start from bad thoughts. A paramedic and a felon have the same human body, but use it in drastically different ways based on their thoughts. So what about that fifth factor of God or divinity? Krishna says God is present even in the felon, in the form of consciousness. It is the same consciousness that makes a murderer see everything through his eyes, but with a deluded mind. That's the problem. So his Jivatma functions just as our Jivatma works, and thus we are both equally potential divinity. The sad point is that the felon is creating huge piles of bad karma to exhaust before he realizes his inherent divinity. Amma says that God has given us free will, along with teachings of how to use it, and it's up to us to hone our judgment and choose only dharma. People cannot blame it on God, which is a common thing. So what is Krishna's aim here after explaining all this, all the sources of actions? And so the point here is that basically all the things, those 5 elements that he mentioned, none of them were the Atma. We had the Jivatma, but that's just a reflection of the original one. So the Chittabhasa is close. It's the closest thing we have in this list of 5 elements, but it's not the actual Atma. So this means that the Atma is indeed free from all action and its fruits. And by summarizing all this, Krishna has covered the essence of chapters 4 through 6. And then Chidbhavananda Swami says, how is the Atman connected with these activities going on in body, speech, and mind? And the answer comes in the next verse, 16. Tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalantu yaha pasyatta krita buddhitvan nasa pashyati durmatihi. Now together slowly. Tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalantu yaha pasyatta krita buddhitvan nasa pashyati durmatihi. I had to make a number of changes here. This is how I ended up with. Notwithstanding this, one who, through unperfected understanding, looks upon himself, the Absolute, as the agent, the doer, he is of bad judgment and does not see correctly. I'll read it one more time because it's quite different from what you're seeing on the screen. Notwithstanding this, one who through unperfected understanding looks upon himself, the Absolute, as the doer, we can say, instead of agent. It's a little more familiar. He is of bad judgment and does not see correctly. Okay, so now the commentary. He here refers to the unenlightened person. So we don't want to get any realized people mixed up with this concept. So the unenlightened person regarding himself as identical with the 5 causes, body, subtle body, etc. Through ignorance. So that's the only way anybody would identify with all of these things. So it is avidya. And thinking, I am the doer of these actions. Then he asks a rhetorical question, why does he think so? because he has unperfected understanding, an understanding that has not been refined by the study of Vedanta philosophy, the teaching of the Guru, and reasoning. So I think if you have met Amma a long time ago, you would certainly feel that you're much less attached to the body, hopefully, and you have some idea of Vedanta philosophy and the teachings of Amma. So we are slowly refining our minds, gradually. So he's saying that this is somebody who has not have done any of that. Okay. Then he goes on to say, there are also those who hold that the Atman is different from the body, but still look upon the Atman as the doer, which is really pure, which is actually pure and different from them. So such people are also unperfected. Such people are also of unperfected understanding. Basically, he's talking about people like us. We know that, the Atman is not the doer, but we tend to think that we're doing it, and that means the Atman we're saying that I am doing it, I'm going to do that. When we say that, we're actually talking about the Atman because that's who's speaking. And the consciousness is speaking, so to speak. And but we might say, okay, but the Atman's different. So we say that the Atman is different than the body, but then we act as though we are the body. And we forget to claim the Atman for ourselves. So it's like a third party, in other words. I know it's not the body, and I know it's not all this body and the subtle body, but I don't know what it is actually. So there's a third element that we're adding into it because we don't understand what it really is. So confused people like us typically have like three factors that they're juggling, and they can't understand what they are actually. Therefore, he does not correctly see the truth about the self or about action. Consequently, he is one of bad judgment. His intelligence is pathetic, misled, and deplorable. That doesn't sound very good. Leading to perpetual birth and death. Though seeing, he doesn't see properly, like one who has cataracts sees many moons, or like one who seated in a vehicle thinks he is moving forwards, even though an adjacent vehicle is actually moving. So even back thousands of years ago, no, actually this is 750 years ago. So he's talking about a horse-drawn cart or something like that. You have one here and then another one here. This one's heading this way and this one's going this way. And your cart, which is like on a train or in a car at a stoplight, your car doesn't move, but the car next to you moves, so you think that you're moving. It happens to all of us, right? So this example is very helpful in understanding how we mistake pure consciousness for doing something, while in reality, it is Prakriti that does everything. Remember, that's the gunas, sattva, and rajas and tamas, and the 5 elements mixed together. They are, all these elements of the world are what are doing all the chemical reactions. We're not doing it. We can mix them together, but we don't make it happen. The way things are, they're happening on their own by the qualities of Prakriti. So, while in reality it is Prakriti that does everything, not the Atman. Forgetting our true nature as the immovable forgetting our true nature as the immovable Atman, we project on the self the qualities of Prakriti, like action, movement, etc. So it is a very simple illusion that we have all experienced on a train or a car, but it fools us every time, doesn't it? You're sitting there and it goes and you think, oh, the train's going, or the car's going. So, the same thing is happening with our identification with the body and forgetting the consciousness. Jnaneshwar's commentary now. See how the soul has found itself in the clutches of the five causes. Sunlight assumes no form, but it makes all forms visible. In that way, the Atman itself does not perform any action, but reveals all actions. Though the sun never experiences the day or the night, it creates them. In that way, the Atma makes all actions discernible without being the doer. Getting identified with the body form, one's Jivatma gets entangled in the body with the result that he remains in total darkness in regard to self-knowledge. One whose conception of consciousness, God, and Supreme Brahman does not extend beyond the body considers it an established truth that the Atma is the doer of actions. So, I want to state that in a little simpler language. So one whose conception of consciousness is just whatever's ever in this body. So my consciousness, your consciousness, his consciousness, they're all separate. And so his consciousness is making this body work, and so that's one body, another body. So it thinks that the Atma in me is doing something, the Atman in you is doing something, and it's all confusion. He has really no firm conviction that the Atma alone is the doer, but rather thinks, I am myself the body, the doer of actions. He is not even prepared to hear, I am that soul that transcends actions and is a neutral onlooker in regard to all actions. Therefore, there is nothing strange in it that he should equate the infinite self with the finite body, because that's all he knows, right? Why shouldn't a person who has never seen the real sun mistake the sun's reflection in the pond to be the original one? Right? Maybe you never looked up at the sky and you see it in the pond. You say, oh, that's the sun. He is bound to hold the belief that, number one, the sun exists because of the pond. Number two, when the pond evaporates, the sun will cease to exist. And number three, the ripples on the pond's surface is responsible for the sun flickering. The reason why this example is so important is because the pond represents the body. So an ignorant person, and we all have that ignorance to some degree, we think that this pond of a reflection is what gives life to the sun of Atma. And then when this body evaporates, then the Atma is gone also. And then the ripples on the pond surface, like I'm getting wrinkly, getting gray hairs, and my body's getting old, and wrinkles, and so that's impacting the Atma as well. All these three forms of ignorance will come along with that assumption. So long as a sleeping person remains unawakened, he is bound to feel everything in his dream to be real. One who does not permit even a casual reference to the scriptures or the Guru leads a fool's life. With such a false impression, the Jivatma gets bound in the prison of the body with strong bonds of rajas. They're in the body, I want to do something, today I'm going to go out and do a lot of things, I'm going to get it all done. And then you come home, I didn't get it all done, and we feel bad. So that's our own fault for identifying with the body. Now, a little more explanation before we get to the next verse. Because we are connected to something active, we might feel that we have done something. Also, that connection to activity is what makes us feel active. Let's say you're a passenger in a car and you're going somewhere, but you yourself are doing nothing. You're just sitting in the passenger seat. How did we get there? Not due to our own actions, but because we are associated with a car that is moving. That means that doership is of two types. There's direct doership and there's indirect doership. As newborns, we did very little. At least I did. I don't think we're any different. But we still moved from room to room, to the park, to see grandma, etc. And all that not due to our own efforts, but simply because we were literally attached to one of our parents in a stroller or a baby sling or in their arms or something like that. So might have thought we were doing all these, I'm going over here, I'm going here, there. We don't realize it's just our parents is carrying us everywhere. So that shows how, just even from the beginning of life, we have some confusion. Another example is that of the space in a pot. We may call it the space in the pot, or the pot space. But when the pot is moving, space is not moving, because space is all-pervasive. Similarly, the Atma permeates the body, but it is not a joint doer with the body. And if you didn't know, all these ideas already came up in chapter 2, mostly in chapter 2, verse 19, where Krishna says, "One who understands themselves to be the slayer and one who takes themselves to be the slain, both fail to perceive the truth. Neither slays nor is slain." All this language is just coming because it's on the battlefield. But the basic thing is the Atman doesn't do anything, nor can anybody do anything to the Atma. If a person says that the Atma is doing, that person doesn't understand at all. That's the meaning of that verse, verse 19 of chapter 2. So why doesn't he understand? Because he's of bad judgment, a mind sullied with ignorance, a defective intellect. Unfortunately, if you get a defective intellect, you don't get a refund, because we ourselves make the intellect defective by wrong choices. And since the intellect is ignorant, Krishna says, through unperfected understanding. He doesn't say that it's hopeless. That person's never going to be any better. No, it's unperfected. You gotta like kind of polish it a bit more. The person needs more Atma, Anatma, Viveka, which means he needs to understand how to discern the difference between the self and the non-self. We need to understand what is eternal and what is not. So with all the language, it can be confusing, but the difference between Atma and Anatma is just the difference between our true self and Maya. It is understanding what is real and unreal, what is eternal and what isn't. So this goes for all of us. But it doesn't mean that we should look at the world with detest. Amma has said that many times. I want to share something that she said a long time ago. Once someone asked Amma about detachment, because maybe not so much these days, but like when I first came to Amma and when I first went to Amrita Puri, there was a lot of importance given to renunciation and detachment. And so you saw people going like, oh, this world is so bad, you know. They didn't understand the true teaching. So this is a conversation where Amma explained it much better. I mean, explained it in a way that we can understand much better. So she says, we don't have to hate the world that is unreal. Instead, we should learn from the unreal world how to reach the eternal world. That eternal world is what we want. And only through love can we expand towards that. When the moon rises, all the waters of the oceans and lakes on earth rise towards it out of love. The flower blossoms to enjoy the touch of the wind, and this too is out of love. So what brings us bliss? Not detachment, but prema, pure love. And the person who asked the question in the first place said, I don't want the happiness that comes from loving something. Probably just a misunderstanding of the word love. And Amma said, what a seeker loves is not anything separate from himself. He loves his own true self, which pervades everything around him. The more his love for the eternal grows, the stronger becomes his urge to know the eternal, and that alone. Thus, when we love the eternal, real detachment develops towards everything else. For us, Amma is the symbol of that eternal. And so, no matter what's going on, if Amma's in town, everybody has complete detachment over those things, other things. So that shows, and they'll leave, go on a strenuous trip all the way over to India to see her these days, spending money. So it's the most important thing for them in life. So they have detachment, they save up their money because we have detachment for other things. Of course, this is easier said than done. Why? Because as soon as we learned how to talk, we said, "Look at me," pointing at our body. "See what I did. I'm hungry, mommy, I'm tired," even though it's just the body. This means that I, the Atma, is identified with Anatma, the body, which has been our condition from birth. Then Amma comes along and helps us segregate the two. And she does that through helping us to cultivate new habits that facilitate right understanding instead of our present confusion. That's what she's been doing with these children. Even this morning, she was talking with Bodham, and trying to, there was no translation maybe. She was saying, like, when you do this, then your heart opens and you get closer to God, and then you don't make mistakes. And she's guiding him, and then each time she'll say something, and she's like, "So this is how you do it, right?" And he goes, "Yes." "And then this happens, is that right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And it's so funny because she's spoon feeding him the answers, and he's saying yes. So, but he's learning that way. It's beautiful. So he gets this feeling like he said it. So he gets some ownership instead of having some this is that, memorize it. Her way of teaching is so beautiful. An example of Krishna doing that comes in chapter 3, verse 27, where he says, "Actions are in every case performed by the gunas of Prakriti. One whose mind is deluded by the sense of I holds that I am the doer." Again, a clear statement that the actions are taking place only due to, we could just say, like chemical reactions in the modern language. It's happening on itself. Some vibrations are coming out of my mouth into this microphone and some wires carrying it somewhere. Like that, everything that's going on inside our body is just one more element of this world, and it's not the consciousness that's doing it. It's doing it because it's built like that. Prakriti includes everything in this universe, but the Atma transcends the universe. So it is not included, or it's not limited by it. The gunas of Prakriti are only inert matter, which includes our body, mind, intellect, everything. So if you didn't remember that, the body is definitely considered to be inert, and that means the mind is also. The intellect is also inert. It's hard to believe that, because consciousness is not a property of the mind or intellect. They have their functions, but that doesn't include consciousness. Without the consciousness, the mind is just inert. And Tattva Bodha, if you're interested, you can read Tattva Bodha. It explains how the universe came into existence, and each step where the intellect, the sum total intellect came, the sum total mind, the sum total prana came. So everything in this universe, including the mind and intellect, is inert. So go back to chapter 13 and remember. The 5 causes mentioned in this verse are the same as Prakriti Gunas. So Shankaracharya says, who then is the wise one who sees rightly? We heard about people who don't see rightly. Jnaneshwar gives an introduction to the next verse by saying, now I shall describe the signs by which you can recognize one who remains quite untouched by actions, even while abiding in them. It's Amma. Even while abiding in them, in the way a submarine fire, means like when lava flows into the ocean, it's burning inside the ocean, right? So they call that a submarine fire. even while abiding in them in the way a submarine fire, though submerged in the ocean, is untouched by the sea water and abides independently of the ocean's actions, even though in their midst. One attains moksha by constantly contemplating on the merits of those who have already attained moksha. She's not attaining it, she was born with moksha. Just as one discovers a lost article by constantly searching for it in the light. One can see one's own reflection clearly in a mirror by rubbing it clean with polish. In this way, from the darshan of a Mahatma, a person can restore the missing essence of the Supreme Brahman. We should ever sing their praises and only listen to their satsangs. The faculty of vision abiding in the physical eyes is not stopped by the eyelids. In that way, even while immersed in actions, one does not get bound by them. The signs of such a liberated one I will now explain to you. I think he's just going to say, Amma, one word. Let's see what he has to say. Yasya nahankrito bhavo bhudiryasya nalipyate attvapisa imalokan nahanti na nibhadyate. Now together. Yasya nahan krito bhavo buddhiryasya nalipyate attvapi sa imalokan nahanti na nibadhyate. Made some changes here too. One who is free from the notion of doership, whose intelligence is not tainted, though he kills these worlds, he kills not, nor is bound by sin. So the commentary here, Shankaracharya says, one whose understanding has been refined by studying the scriptures, the Guru's teaching and reasoning, and who is free from the notion of doership, to whom the concept, I am the doer, does not occur, who perceives that these five causes are the sole performers of actions and not I. I, on the other hand, am merely the witness of their actions, birthless, without the energy and mental sheaths, pure and beyond Maya, the perfect and immutable. So he says, basically the one who doesn't claim any of the five factors and claims only the pure consciousness and how it's been explained in the scriptures, including the Upanishads. And continuing, one of the foregoing description, what we just said, is wise, seeing rightly. And though he kills these worlds, that means all living creatures. He kills not means he does not perform the act of killing. And nor is he bound, that means that he's not bound by the fruit of adharma. So it sounds contradictory. He kills, but he doesn't kill. What is this contradiction? Shankaracharya says it is not a contradiction. The statement is proper when viewed from the worldly and the absolute standpoints conjoined together. He does that sometimes. He will, Krishna uses the same word, but in the first time he uses it, he means it in one sense, and then the second time he uses it, he uses it in a different sense. That's what we're seeing here. Following the worldly standpoint, I kill not, is true, due to non-identification with the body as one's own self. And he kills is also true from the standpoint of the absolute truth. There is no individual separate from Brahman. So he's killing the notion of individuality. That's what Kali signifies, cutting all those heads off. You know, she's doing it to free them from the ignorance of that they think they are the body. So he's not killing necessarily, he's killing the notion of individuality. Now, Jnaneshwar's commentary, I'm warning you, is a little bit long, but very, very helpful. And I just have to, I'm not even sharing everything, so please forgive me. The being, he's talking about just all of us, all living things. The being whose pristine nature is consciousness, and who was from all eternity wandering through and enjoying the world dream in the deep slumber of ignorance, was suddenly awakened from that sleep in the blissful state of non-differentiation by being addressed with the sacred words that you are. So up to the slumber of ignorance, we can even include animals. But being awakened and being spoken those sacred words, Tat Tvamasi, that you are, this is only for human beings. And receiving a blessing, the Guru placing his palm on the disciple's head, through the power of the Guru's grace, in the manner of a person asleep who is patted on the head by someone to end his slumber. And in such a state, there remains no egotism in that being. He's saying that in the old days, thousands and maybe even in the time of Jnanadev, Jnaneshwar, maybe he's talking about his own guru, who is his elder brother. So it used to be that the disciple would live with the guru from age 8 to 20, and some would get married after that, others would just remain there and take sannyas. And but the idea is that they serve their guru, and the guru will keep giving them teachings, but very infrequently. Then they have to meditate on those for a long time, and ultimately the guru gives these mahavakyas, great dictums from the Vedas, like Tat Tvamasi, which is referred here. And when saying so, he puts his hand, or she puts her hand on the disciple, and they get liberation. They lose their, feeling of duality. That's the explanation we're hearing here. The mirage of a flood appears like one continuous and vast sheet of water, but disappears altogether when the moon's rays spread out. The fear of monsters departs along with the departure of childhood. Once a log is completely burnt, it cannot be restored to firewood. A dream cannot be restored after awakening. Even if the sun were to go into a deep cave in search of darkness, it still would not find it there. In such ways, one who has attained the Supreme Self finds that each and every visible object assumes the form of the Self, the seer, and they become one with him. Whatever comes in contact with fire becomes the fire, eliminating all distinction. In that way, the concept of duality involved in action is based on the false idea that the Self is the doer. When that false idea is destroyed, Whatever remains as residue is the very state of the Supreme Self. Securing mastery over this state, could one ever remain confined to the body form? I mean, in other words, you can never confine Amma to the body form. I have an example to show you later, to share with you later. Could the all-pervading upsurge of the waters at Pralaya, that means the dissolution of the universe, right? The upsurge of the waters at Pralaya be controlled by a small creek? So the whole universe is going to be destroyed, and it's going to be stopped by a little creek? In that way, how can a tiny body form control the all-pervading recognition of being Brahman? Is it possible to control the sun by capturing his reflected image in water? In that way, how could one who has swallowed the very distinction of known and knower feel any delusion of being the body? Having no real motion, the sky remains equally full everywhere it goes, and thus remains all-pervading. Even one in whom the delusion of the body being the soul has vanished, owing to the realization of the self, so long as he is in the body, he must continue to perform actions. So this is a little confusing, the second half of this paragraph. So, in other words, if you're an avatar like Amma, from the beginning you know you're not the body. But for someone who, like the usual example is Ramana Maharshi, he is a recognized Jivan Mukti who attained liberation while in the body, and he lived after that. So people used to come to him and ask him questions, lots of beautiful conversations recorded from his time. So we know he's a Mahatma, realized being, but he wasn't when he was born. So he's referring to such a person who becomes realized while he's alive, but then things still happen in his life. So what happened? What's this deal with the karma? So he's still in the body, so he still must continue to perform actions, and they all do. Even though the wind ceases to blow, still the flutter of the tree leaves continues for some time. Even though funeral camphor evaporates completely, its fragrance still remains behind for some time. Even though the singing stops, the mental exhilaration created by it lingers for some time. Even as the sun sets in the west, the twilight's glow still remains. In such ways, though the ego vanishes, the prakriti that brought the present body keeps the body performing actions. There's some kind of karma remaining, but for someone like Ramana Maharishi, that was burnt up completely when he got realization. Now, when you say it's burnt, it doesn't mean that the body doesn't experience it. And in the terms of his experience, it's completely separate from him now. But the body still has to go through all that. And that's why sometimes Mahatmas die very painful deaths, because it is just their body that's, consuming all the karma, because there's no more births going to take place. So it has to get rid of it all in that one body. So we think that's horrible and that they're suffering, but they're not, because they don't identify with the body. So now we need to understand a little bit more about how Prakriti works, how this material world works. And Jnaneshwar gives a good explanation here. Dreams appear without any premeditation. Bushes grow without any advanced plan. Clouds form without any structure. In that way, actions are performed on account of the 5 causes, including the body, etc., without the Atma doing anything. So, it's just like a dog sees a cat and he barks, or he barks at the car. I mean, this is their nature. So all these things are the nature built into Prakriti. It's nothing to do with the Atman. the Atma remains disembodied in its outlook, even while in the body form, and never pays attention to the fluctuations of worldly affairs. In the way one awakened from sleep does not pay attention to their dreams. The Atma appears engaged in actions as a doer to those who are not able to see beyond the The Atma appears engaged in actions as a doer to those who are not able to see beyond the body form, as they view him merely through their physical eyes. So we're similar. We look through our physical eyes and we judge people and we say, oh, he's so-and-so is here. No, so-and-so, she left. So our whole way of communication is, imbued with that concept of duality and putting the Atma on top of the body. So once during darshan, a devotee asked a question to Amma. She said, Amma, I once heard you say that there are two mothers, the outer mother and the inner mother. I don't understand what you mean by that. Can you please explain this division? No, Amma gave a very long response. We don't have time for that, so I'm just going to give the beginning of her response. Son, there are two different aspects of Amma. The Maya Rupam, in other words, the illusory form, and the mother of the mind of minds. So the mind of minds, the universal mind, she's the mother of the universal mind. The Maya Rupam, the illusory form, is the external form, the body, which we love so much. Yes, we know it's the most adorable form in this universe, but she says it's still the external form. You consider this body as mother, and you call this form Amma. But in the depths of the mind of minds, there is another mother. You do not visually see the mother which is in the mind of minds. You only see the external mother. But the inner mother, whose true nature is infinitude and silence, manifests visibly through this body so that her children can have a glimpse of the mother who is deep within. So, it's a very profound explanation. She's saying, all you can understand right now is this body, whatever I say, whatever I do, etc. But this is just a tool for you to understand that behind this is the Atma, and behind there is also the Atma. And she's trying to help us realize that. I don't know how well we're doing it, but we have to try. A little more of Yaneshwar's commentary and one more Amma story. He says, one who has realized the self and whose role as a seer has become one with the seen and who has merged into it does not know what actions get performed by their body organs. This is something that harkens back to Amma's early days when she would be completely oblivious of what she was doing in her body. She was in another dimension. She was in samadhi. And sometimes she would be, samadhi, we can understand that she's always in samadhi. There were times where she would just kind of turn herself off and just sit there. And it was like she was dead almost. And then there are other times where she was just in rapture and in bliss. That's also a kind of samadhi. So this is one of those kind of explanations, one of those occurrences. This story comes from when Amma was only 23 years old. It was a beautiful sight to witness the sun setting on the western horizon to witness the sun setting on the western horizon into the Arabian Sea. The waves gleefully danced, singing the ever-vibrant sound, Om. The Holy Mother, accompanied by the residents and devotees, began singing bhajans in the temple. Amma slowly became more and more absorbed in the singing. These days she's a good girl. She doesn't let herself go into samadhi during the bhajans, But back then, you never knew when she was going to. And then there's this song, Parasahasra Hridayangalil. You might have heard that song. There was a particular verse that touched her, and it goes, O thou who art meditated upon in thousands of hearts, thou blazest forth forever in the minds of those who have realized God. And as Amma sang these lines, she became overwhelmed with bliss, and she merged in a state of divine inebriation. She was literally divinely drunk. She began crying like a small child, now and then calling out, Amma, Amma, as she does now, followed by ecstatic laughter, which continued for a long time. The residents and devotees also were filled with bliss as they continued singing, drinking the nectar of the divine name. By this time, she began a rapturous dance, punctuated with blissful laughter. She doesn't even know what's, if you ask her, what she was doing, and she was like, I was in bliss. Some of the brahmacharis watching the scene became oblivious to the surroundings and shed tears of joy. Some others sat merged in meditation. Eventually, Amma's father came to the spot, Suganachan, and caught hold of her hand and made her lie down on a mat, thinking that something very serious had happened to his daughter. Something very important happened, but wasn't serious. But Amma was still in another world, her hands holding a mudra and her face radiating like the rising sun. And that was a regular occurrence back then. Now, once again, the continuation of Jnanadev's commentary. Observers standing on the bank of a river may think that small ripples are merging into big ones. But from the standpoint of water, the notion of a big wave gulping up a small ripple is absurd, because it's all water. In that way, for one who has attained perfection, nothing exists distinct from himself. In the case of a realized being, the bodily actions take place according to his destiny or past life karma. Would it make any sense to say that one should first discover darkness with the help of a light, then destroy the darkness? No. A self-realized being has nothing else left outside of him that he should illuminate. He is everywhere. Actions performed by their body do not bind him karmically. One who identifies with the self is never imprisoned by actions. Now, some commentary from Swami Chidbhavananda. It's about a mirror. The mirror is actually a very good analogy for the Atma as well. A mirror reflects a person moving, but that mirror is not the cause of the reflective form and its movement. The reflection also leaves no impression on the mirror. Being a reflecting surface, the mirror is ever unattached, unaffected, and unmodified. The Atman, the pure consciousness, is the same. It reveals the activities of Prakriti, but the Atman is not a doer of anything. Being the ruler of Prakriti, it is not bound by it. One who traces their original state to this pure consciousness regains their pristine understanding. So, he's explaining, part of it is an explanation of Amma. She is like a reflected surface. She's unattached, unaffected, and unmodified. And if you watch darshan, you see that all the time. If the person comes and cries, like when Ron was crying, at one point Amma was also crying. So she's just reflecting what's there. And then when somebody's happy, she's happy for them. And then when somebody's sort of like internally drawn, she might match their wavelength when they come for darshan. But it's not affecting her in truth. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna described the viewpoint of an ignorant person, and that's us, unfortunately. We mix up Atma and Anatma, and we take the body to be the living entity, the consciousness, and we don't understand the Atma enough to understand that it's eternal. So we get them mixed up. In this verse, we hear what true wisdom is. Identifying with the Anatma rather than the Atma gives rise to the ego. Now, that's more about the previous verse, but that the Sanskrit word for ego is ahamkara. Ahamkara. Aham just means I, and kara means the doer. I, the doer, is ahamkara. So when we get rid of that feeling that I'm the doer, what remains is just aham. Aham brahmasmi. Aham brahmasmi. So that is, the first word is aham, I, and then I am Brahman. You can't say ahamkara brahmasmi. That's not going to work. I, the doer, am God. I, the doer, am Brahman. That's not going to work. It's only aham. So if there's just I can claim Brahman. I can identify with Brahman. But so long as we identify with the body, doership will be impossible to discard. The real I becomes the false I, or the lowercase I instead of uppercase. A wise person, however, has only the capital I. Why? Because their mind is not tainted by wrong understanding. Their actions do not create any more karma as a result. There's a doer, but it is not me. It is Prakriti. This is their vision. And that's definitely Amma's vision. She will say, like someone that gives her an award, this is for you, Amma. She goes, no, this goes to my children. They did everything. But why are we doing it? Only because we're inspired by her. But she knows that all of this is on the level of the, Prakriti. We're not talking about the Atman. We're talking about worldly things, doing things, building hospitals. She's not going to say, I'm the one who did it. So, that is why Krishna says, even if he kills all these soldiers, he kills nobody. Therefore, he's not bound by the act of killing. So remember, some people might feel, why all this war-based language? We have to remember that the Bhagavad Gita was given at the beginning of a war. And I guess you could say, if it were the Last Supper, or it was during a banquet, perhaps Krishna would have said, even if he eats all these dishes, even if he destroys all these dishes, he eats nothing, he destroys nothing. It would be much more kind of tame language. But such a teaching is thoroughly unhelpful on a battlefield. So Arjuna's problem was, do I fight or do I run away? And he's responding to that with this jargon. Naturally, people of a cunning nature might use this verse to justify the mischief they create. Like a drunken driver saying, this is an example that Amma uses, he says, I'm the Atma, so I didn't get into a crash. I didn't do anything wrong. It was the Anatma gasoline's fault. Because without the gasoline, the car wouldn't have gone and gotten an accident. So Amma says that the judge will say, okay, that's okay. Don't worry, I'm not going to put the Atma in the jail. I'm only going to put your Anatma body in jail. So that's a fair response. So even Amma, who is fully aware that she is not the body, she never allows her body to do any adharma. So even a Jivan Mukti, or whether it's an avatar even, they will never break the rules of dharma, and they will never do adharma. They'll always do good things and not do bad things. They don't have to for their own sake, because they're only doing it to show people what the right path is. And the next topic is about all things that prompt human beings into action. Next week. And we have just a few more minutes left to answer a question that came since the last class. The question is, yajna, dana, and tapas, which we explained in the beginning of today's class. This person is reiterating what they understood. Yajna, dana, and tapas can purify the mind, which in turn can reduce karma pertaining to present and potentially future thoughts and actions. Right? That's the that's the meaning of it. And is the process expedited by past accumulated karma bundled in there and also reduced simultaneously, or does the past karma linger and only through the accumulation of good deeds over lifetimes, the good deeds eventually outweigh the past karma? So it's a it's a question about how we can exhaust our karma better, and how does that connect with yajna, dana, and tapas. So yajna, dana, and tapas, as we heard earlier, basically doing that and relinquishing the doership notion and the fruits of it, we're basically doing karma yoga. And it's also bhakti yoga, because it's an offering to God. So the benefit of this is primarily inner purification. When you let go of these things, you are purifying yourself because it's karma yoga. That's the whole purpose of karma yoga. And as the mind becomes pure and more pure, our bad karma is decreased because we're more pure. We don't have so many negative qualities within us. That means we don't do so many bad things, and we are reducing our bad karma. And at the same time, a purified mind is also more suited to spiritual knowledge. We can understand Amma's teachings better, we can retain them more, we can understand the scriptures, we can practice them more because they have sunk deep into our mind. So these are the benefits of yajna, dana, tapas, in other words, karma yoga. And as the seeker acquires more and more knowledge, now we're getting into the field of jnana yoga, understanding and retaining and going deeper and deeper into the teachings. Then less good and bad karma are created. Remember, we don't want either one. We don't want good karma or bad karma, because they're both karma. And since this person's question is, how do we get rid of all the bad karma? You cannot just reduce your bad karma. We are going to be increasing our good karma so long as we identify with this body. So we're going to have to keep coming. Go to heaven, go have a lot of nice food and luxuries, come back to earth. If we want to attain liberation, karma should not be on our mind at all, whether it's good or bad. I don't want good karma either. I want to be liberated. I want to merge in Amma. So if you're saying I want good karma, that's one more thing that you want. So your love for Amma is fractured. We just want we want to be on the path, we want to reach Amma and merge there. I don't care about karma. That's how our attitude should be. And until we attain self-realization, we can aspire to be a sattvic sannyasi, the word that's used in this chapter, trying our best to relinquish the feeling of doership and expectations of personal benefit from our actions. In this way, we can surely reduce both types of karma from our actions. You understand? So, bad karma is chains with thorns on it, and good karma is gold chains. You want to be in iron? You want to be in iron chains, or you want to be in gold chains? This is the example that's been given. We don't want either one. I don't want any chains. So for that, we have to let go of the notion of doership. Then this person had another question, which is, what does Amma mean by the past is a cancelled check? Is it just meant to stop worry about what we cannot change? Yes, to some degree. The past is a cancelled check means it is dead and gone, so it cannot be changed, yes. And thus, we need not waste our time and energy thinking about it. So, the one thing that's missing from this person's question is that the next step is we should use the present moment for positive and constructive thoughts, words, and actions. Because Amma says only this moment is in our hands. We cannot change the past, and the future is not here yet. So there's no point in thinking about them and trying to do something in either of those times. You can only do something in the figurative sense, in the present. So she's trying to, it's not so much about the past per se, it's a way of forcing us to look at the present moment rather than the past. It's not so much about worry, it's about making the best use of the present moment. Okay. So we will conclude with the usual 2 closing prayers. And for those who have time, please join us for a brief meditation. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwariya Namaha. We'll now meditate for some time. Please close your eyes. Check your posture to make sure your back and neck are relatively straight. And slow down your breathing process. With each long, deep breath, feel the mind and body becoming relaxed further and further. Feel Amma's subtle presence all around you. Feel her embrace and the warmth of her heart. In her arms, the feeling of duality dissolves. We feel one with her in that embrace. Now focus your attention on the rhythmic flow of your breathing process. The flow of the breath is like a small body of water, like a stream flowing harmoniously and peacefully. And you are on the banks of that stream, witnessing that peaceful flow of the breath. Now in this state of relative peaceful mind, let us visualize think of a point, a recent moment when you had a very powerful feeling of doership. Of course, it is always unintentional. We don't do it on purpose. But it happens. And try to remember such an incident. How was it that we felt so attached, so identified as the doer? Why was it so important to me? what likes or dislikes of mine might have made it stronger, the feeling of doership. Now imagine how that situation or episode would have concluded if you had completely detached yourself, if you recognized yourself to be not involved personally, not looking for the outcome or rewards, just doing it as an instrument. Amma's instrument. Now let us pray to Amma that she can help us remember in every action that we are only her instruments. Let us offer our hands, feet, speech, and thoughts over to her, and request her to bless them so that we will be able to remember we are only her instruments. Now let us conclude with the final prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes. Thank you all so much for joining us, and hope to see you next week as well. Om Namah Shivaya.